Well, hey, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Perspective is the eye of the visible world. There's something about that phrase that just shook me last year, right after I left this conference and I shared some of the research that we do at Future Commerce and the way that consumers are changing, the way that businesses adopt software, and the way that they build experiences in the world using the technologies that people like us in this room create. I was introduced through my co-founder at Future Commerce to an area of philosophy that I had never experienced before. Of course, you know, like a lot of people, I was a self-taught programmer. I was a homeschooled kid for a while who dropped out of college to go on the road with my band. So I fell down this rabbit hole at a late part of my life to realize that there are things happening in the world right now that people thought very deeply about a century ago. And so I'm going to take you a little bit on some of this journey and how all of this thought and this school of thought of what we're experiencing right now, I believe started right here in this room with people that have been building community together for ages. So the eye is the center of and perspective is the center of the visible world. One of the men in the beginning of that, one of the dead philosophers in the beginning clip is a man named Marshall McLuhan. Who's ever heard of Marshall McLuhan? 3 people did media studies here. That's awesome. So you're going to learn a lot here today. He said, in 1961, the computer is the most extraordinary of man's technological clothing. It is an extension of our central nervous system. And in 1961, people thought he was crazy. But today, we wear computers like we wear clothing, right? It is something that we have on us every day. I had to take my glasses off here because coming up here, there's a lot of glare with the glasses. But my glasses are computer. Now, I have the Meta Ray-Bans. Anybody heard of these? I can live stream from my glasses. They talk to me. I have a little sort of attention light. It tells me when I have a notification on my phone. Computers are now in our perspective, and it's made our perspective the center of the visible world. I'm going to tell you a story today about a time that most of us in this room lived through that tells you when I believe all of this changed. Who remembers what Google used to look like? In 2008, Google, there was an update push to the homepage of Google, which at the time included only a search box. The man who pushed the button was an engineer by the name of Kevin Gibbs. And Kevin Gibbs went on to create all kinds of things in his spare time at Google. Google used to have this program called 20% time, right? So 1/5 of your week could be spent building pet projects, and you could benefit from the success of those projects if those projects became a commercial success. One such project that Kevin Gibbs created was called Google Suggest. And Google Suggest, on one fateful day in 2008, at the push of a button, changed what once was a query from a user, an instruction for Google to deliver a list of results that were relevant based on the query, into a prompt. So he pushed the button, and this is what happened. For about 24 hours, just long enough for the internet to screenshot it so that it would live on in infamy. If you typed "what are," you don't even have to take a picture of this. I wrote a book about it. It's called Archetypes, archetypesjournal.com. For one fateful day, if you typed "what are" into the homepage of Google, the top result was, "What are the strawberries doing on my nipples? I need them for the fruit salad." I swear to you. It's a true story. Of course, Reddit popped off. Dig.com was big at the time. It was the top story, made a bunch of media, and people were like, ha ha ha, Google, so silly. It was it was fixed very quickly after that. Why? Why did this happen? Well, it turns out that if you're a Google engineer, you think to yourself, I'm going to create an algorithm that has to have highly authoritative sources. So where are the source of authority in our world? Well, number one, commerce is a highly authoritative source. And especially in 2008, there were sort of a center of gravity around where things were sold in the world. And so you had this little site called Amazon.com where you could buy books. And it turns out one other part of that algorithm that drove relevancy was published works. So items for sale and published works. The other part of the algorithm, this is incredible, is works by people of renown or celebrities. And the woman who wrote this book, Vanessa Feltz, is a cultural commentator and a magazine columnist for She Magazine and worked for the BBC for 30 years and wrote a sex advice column. And the name of her book of collected works from her sex advice column was called "What Are These Strawberries Doing on My Nipples? I Need Them for the Fruit Salad." Someone TikTok that, because that's just funny out of context. When asked about it later, she said that she had no idea that that even happened, but it did cause a run on her books. It only had one printing. The book stocked out overnight, right? The site, Amazon.com, had them no more. They started going for resale and pumped up the resale volume of these books. In fact, when we went to go write a piece about this for Future Commerce about a year and a half ago, there were high-resolution scans of that book cover. So we had to go find these. They're almost $100 a piece at this point. We bought a few copies. We actually wound up gaming the Amazon algorithm because we bought so many copies. Amazon thought, a lot of these Amazon resellers thought that, oh, this book is trending, and they started jacking up the prices. It's wild. But Vanessa Feltz, keep this in mind because it's really important. Published works, commerce is the center of gravity, right? Celebrities being involved in shaping that culture, and then also memeable and mimesis moments that create a media frenzy, okay? So what is that? At least to Kevin Gibbs, and at least for Google Suggest, and at least for the 20% time that he spent, commerce was the authority that drove the relevancy. And that is actually my thesis at Future Commerce, that commerce is culture. And if you have been around the Magento ecosystem for any amount of time, you know that there is a persistent culture that exists of openness and sharing and a multiplayer dynamic that brings people together to attend a cause that is bigger than ourselves. Am I right? Commerce is culture. And that's what we do at Future Commerce. A little quick word about me. Philip, 10 years ago, actually, this coming June, I started a podcast called Mage Talk, which was talking not about techniques or the best ways to build things in Magento, but talking about the culture of the ecosystem. The ecosystem had grown to be so large that we had a very viable media property called Mage Talk that went on to do about 300 episodes over a number of years, and almost overnight had 100,000 listeners globally. I wound up emceeing Magento Imagine for a couple years and went on to an amazingly fruitful and very valued, cherished partnership with Adobe after Adobe had acquired Magento. My world and my life was changed not just because of Magento, but because commerce is culture. I shifted gears in 2018 with another media property that I had called Future Commerce, and I wanted to talk about more than just this idea of the technology that implements commerce, but how people buy and belong in the world, and that's what I created. So Future Commerce, I've been doing this almost 2 years full-time. We are a culture magazine for people in the commerce industry. It's wild. My kids can't explain what I do for a living, and that's okay. But it is pretty cool. I get to meet some cool people like yourselves. So Future Commerce today, futurecommerce.com, and this is the kind of thing that we talk about. Let's go a little bit deeper on this idea of the multiplayer effect. People in the open source community know what multiplayer means, but the world at large is just coming to terms with the fact that everybody can participate in the creation of the way that we buy. Everybody is allowed to participate. We're seeing this all over the culture right now. I wrote a book about this back in June. It's called The Multiplayer Brand, themultiplayerbrand.com. Free shipping United States, flat rate shipping to Canada, ship worldwide, 200 countries. The Multiplayer Brand is about 100 pages, sort of in the style of a Marshall McLuhan zine. That's very graphical exploration. And I'm going to talk through some of the ideas that are contained in that book here today. Last year, I stood on the stage. Ravi graciously sort of shouted out my talk from last year as I was lamenting on the fact that things in technology are complicated, and I think in that way we can't retrain a customer every time they come to a new website. And so as a necessity, we have cultural norms. There are design patterns and norms in the way that we develop software and the way that we present user interfaces so that it is accessible to everybody, and I think that that's a beautiful thing. I have lived in this ecosystem for 20 years, and I'm not disparaging that. I also think at the same time, it's become very boring. We kind of do the same thing over and over. And sites are not as distinctive as they once were. In fact, we did a study, I showed it off here last year, where 64% of people couldn't identify which brand was more premium when we showed them a number of websites with the header removed. So every website kind of looks the same. All the products kind of become homogeneous over time. This is running off the screen as sort of a send-up to the fact that we need to do something that is unexpected in order to inspire and cause curiosity and make us wonder what something is deeper. And by giving an infinite amount of choice to buy online, we actually removed all of the choice at all, because everything's become sort of homogeneous and the same. Unless your customers start pushing on you to change things. The way that we break out of that homogeneity and the way that we get out of that cycle of sameness is it's a phenomenon called overcorrection. Who knows what this vehicle is over here? Just say it. Is it a beautiful car? No? You can talk back. No. Why do you believe this is not a beautiful car? Well, at the time, it was a radical design language departure from what was normal at the time. What was normal was a Ford Focus, which was a much smaller footprint, a very economical car, right? By contrast, the Pontiac Aztek, I think, had 18 miles to the gallon. Ford Focus had 34. In the same year, as this was released, the Pontiac Aztek was kind of one of the first crossover SUVs with this design language that's come along. It was such a radical departure that it was later used as a shorthand for people that have bad taste. If you've seen, I'm sorry to anyone who owned a Pontiac Aztek in this room, apologies. But if you've seen the TV series Breaking Bad, you'll remember that the titular, the main character on Breaking Bad, they use a Pontiac Aztek as his car because it's supposed to make you feel something. You want to feel sorry for him. That's the point, right? So this design language was this massive overcorrection. But what tends to happen with overcorrection is we eventually make it normalized, and then the world kind of coalesces around an overcorrected design pattern. Today, this BMW, the $100,000 car Silhouette, by the way, has an extraordinarily similar design language. You can see the evolutionary pattern that took 20 years to come about. I showed a slide here last year that this is the same silhouette and the same car color is available from 23 car manufacturers right now. So this overcorrection had a massive impact on the design language of an entire industry. It was certainly a sacrificial lamb and not popular at the time, and no one would ever say that that's the homage. But we live through these cycles over and over. This overcorrection is also used, it's a human truth, is that ways to break out of certain cycles, especially destructive ones, is to overcorrect. In therapy, if anyone's ever had any sort of talk therapy, group therapy, if you've ever gone to see a therapist, they'll tell you the power of positive self-talk, right? And the destructive nature of negative self-talk. So if you are in a cycle of not feeling good about yourself, one way is to overcorrect, to say, no, I'm amazing. No, I'm incredible. Man, I'm so beautiful, aren't I? These are ways to sort of break out of that cycle, and it requires massive overcorrection. Eventually, you come back to a norm. You don't have to live there forever, but eventually you find a happy medium. Overcorrection is a multiplayer dynamic because it requires other people to have to take part in the overcorrection for it to become a cultural norm. Now, I'm not saying this happens all the time with everything everywhere, but it does happen. If we want an example in the modern day in design language of automotive manufacturing, this is an overcorrection if there ever was one. It's ugly, and you kind of feel sorry for anyone that owns one. Here's another example of overcorrection in design language. This is a media property. This is The Verge. They've been around for almost 20 years doing culture reporting for technology. You may see The Verge online. You might get some of their news in your feed from time to time. This was a redesign that was issued in late 2022 that has been panned by the critics. It was a complete overhaul of the way that you think about website design. The only way that you know that this is a website and not an app is because there is a top navigation bar. If I were to get rid of that altogether, you would think to yourself, this might be some sort of social media stream. And that was extremely intentional. So the editors at The Verge decided the design language needed to change for a new millennium. We are in a new era where it's not the editorial that matters anymore. It's not the story or the written piece that matters anymore. What matters most, aside from the headline, is the discourse around the story. What are people talking about around the story? That's the important thing. And The Verge overcorrected in their design language to do this. I think this is true in almost everything. You don't have to look very far to say that it's not what Adobe is shipping or Magento is shipping that is the important thing. It's what people are saying about it. Real quiet. So the discourse is actually part of the story. We're actually witnessing this in a lot of different areas of our culture. The speed of change and the speed of this discourse changing on a daily basis means that brands, e-commerce companies have to react faster than ever before. We have to change and adapt at the speed of culture. We can't assume that culture rises to adapt to commerce. They are intrinsically intertwined. This is an e-commerce site. So we talk about the future of commerce. Drake, think about remember what I said, what drives relevancy for the algorithm, especially in 2008. Celebrities actually have an incredibly powerful trickle-down effect in what they normalize, from fashion and what they buy to tastemakers and change in the culture, what they think about, what they say, whether we like it or not. That is how the world works. And Drake launched an e-commerce site 3 years ago. It got almost no press until a particular e-commerce platform started paying for press for them, and then it got a lot of press. Last year, this is a website that is shoppable through discovery. And so what you're looking at is Drake's actual house that is expressed almost as like part of The Sims, right? So you're in Drake's bedroom or you're in Drake's studio. Everything is shoppable and discoverable. You might ask yourself, is this accessible? I don't know. Probably not. This is Drake's private jet. For a certain kind of a person, they will spend an unbelievable amount of time exploring this space. This is not the e-commerce of the future because I don't think every brand will be doing something like this, but this is the kind of thing that feels to me like a overcorrection that eventually pushes an industry forward because we have to, at some point, rise to the expectations of the customer. Why? Because the customers are in a multiplayer game with you and me, pulling us along. Here's another one. It was announced in December at an investor day that Roblox is bringing real-world commerce into their platform. So Roblox has 70 million monthly active users. They are growing up fast, by the way. It used to be that the average age of the person that spent at least one day of the month on the platform was in the 13 to 15 range and had no purchasing power of their own. I called them Carly. It's an acronym, can't afford real life yet. But what happens when Carly becomes Henry, high earner, not rich yet? At some point, between those two, they begin to command an unbelievable amount of purchasing power, and they start shaping commerce around them. Roblox has an unbelievably powerful effect on a very young person. In fact, I've watched my own kids participate in Roblox and how they buy and belong in Roblox and Minecraft and other video game style ecosystems. This is how they pretend to be like you and me. This is how they get the feeling of shopping without their own agency to get in the car, go to the store, and check out at the self-checkout at Publix. So this is where commerce is taking place right now for this age group. And now, fast forward a few years, they're 4 or 5 years older. They're going to start earning their own money. And their expression of commerce is going to look very different. So eventually, the internet gives us a platform where we have to learn and adapt. The future of commerce could be, and I hate this, I hate the thought of this, but companies like Chipotle and 200 other brands are experimenting right now to create branded activations within the Roblox universe. Chipotle has created a careers platform which allows people to come in and punch a clock to serve virtual burritos to virtual buyers in Roblox. You think this is hilarious. I think it's terrifying that people are role-playing as a line cook at Chipotle in Roblox. Sorry, Mom. Homework can wait. I'm on the clock. I have to go make a virtual burrito. The future of commerce. What happens when Roblox flips the switch? This becomes a new channel, and I think there will be cutting-edge brands that invest in this as a part of an omni-channel strategy. It'll start probably with high-end brands, luxury brands that can afford to make a branded leap, afford to get some earned media out of it. They'll spend the money to do it. It's probably not terribly commercially successful for them, but eventually we're going to have to think about new channels like TikTok and others, and everyone in this ecosystem, everyone in this room will have to contend with it's just yet another place to buy things that doesn't look like the web that we typically publish to. This is, you love dead philosophers, I've got a few thousand of them for you. This is actually core to two competing philosophical ideas. So you have Aristotle, and this Aristotelian philosophy would say what we do in website design is very natural. Right? We have the power. And so when we want to persuade a customer to get through to the checkout, we are persuading them by removing friction. We're incentivizing them through promotions and through pricing. And then we're providing things like one-click checkout with PayPal and other means, maybe Bolt, some way for us to reduce the decision-making necessary so that customers shop with us instead of someone else. We're shortening the path, right? We own all the power. We are trying to reduce the friction in front of the customer. There's another school of thought, which is a much more modern school of thought that is very multiplayer in nature, and that is a gentleman named Michel Foucault. And Foucault would tell you that the more modern way of sharing power is through discourse. It's for you and me to have a conversation together. You probably do this in user testing. But you can imagine how tough it would be for the brand, how much friction it would be for the technologists to ask literally everybody what they think and then try to bend to their will. But what happens if technology is no longer necessary for the customer to have a very specific impact on their perception, their eye being the center of the visible world? We've gone through massive shifts of philosophy as science has improved. It used to be that the Earth was the center of the universe. And then it used to be, right, that the sun was the center of the universe. And now, no, we are in a galaxy that is among billions of galaxies that are in an ever-expanding, growing universe. But I hate to be the one to break it to you. In the future, I am the center of the universe. The algorithm shapes around me and my desires. There is a coming element of hyper-personalization where all of the world goes away and it's what I want my way. And that's what technology has to contend with. So I wrote about this. These are great big ideas from an alive philosopher, a man named Henry Jenkins, who did a lot of prolific work at MIT talking about this idea of the participatory culture. We call it multiplayer, he calls it participatory. But the idea of participatory culture is a willingness and an invitation to participate. What I'm saying to you is that the open source community has had that willingness and invitation to participate for 50 years. Everything that we benefit from right now is built on a legacy of open source software that if it were to go away, the world would be poorer for it. Our legacy is building this future. And what we do in this room is the same thing that customers are trying to do to brands. So as we're reducing the friction for people to input code changes, as we're reducing the friction for people to input bug reports or to give feedback in any meaningful way, Eric, product manager of the highest regard, always open door to receive other people's feedback. The culture in this room is one of openness and participation. What I'm telling you is that the culture of the customer is going to be more open and participatory whether we ever like it or not. And so what do we need for a participatory culture in commerce? We need a low barrier to entry for contribution. We need to encourage active creation. And we need a strong reliance on the communities that share similar interests and passions. Now, this was never possible before. when it came to how I exercise my opinion on a consumer brand. But it is now. Because people are stepping up and deciding, actually, Kellogg's, I kind of liked cereal straws when I was a kid. I want them again. And there's nothing better than having 150,000 other people to say they want them again too. What happens when you get enough people to sign a petition on change.org? This is very real, by the way. This was in 2017. In 2020, they brought them back. But the cycle gets shorter and shorter. Here's another one. You might remember the Justice League. There was an online petition that started. By the way, it was led by a group of unsavory individuals. But their voice was extremely loud. It actually prompted Warner Brothers into spending almost $300 million on creating a rumored piece of content that supposedly existed, but in reality did not. So if you've seen Zack Snyder's 4-hour cut of the Justice League, that $300 million investment was 100% championed by a very multiplayer, loud online voice. Here's another one. In September of 2022, Nike announced a partnership with Tiffany. And at any other time in history, if this had happened just a month prior, the media cycle would have been extremely short. It would have been a lot of hype sneaker bros sitting around being like, I can't wait for that Tiffany release. I can't wait. It's going to be so great. I'm going to spend $1,000 on shoes, and I'm going to be able to flex it all over the internet because that's what the culture was at the time. But instead, it happened in September of 2022. What else happened in September of 2022? Midjourney launched. Has anyone used any AI image generation tools in here? Midjourney gave a hungry, active, multiplayer, participatory crowd a tool to envision what the future might look like. So where the prior media cycle was, we're going to announce something and then a month later show it to you, it was announced and 2 hours later images were trending on the internet that had nothing to do with reality. This is what the actual shoe looked like. And by comparison, it is disappointing. So the imagination of the crowd is the multiplayer future for every single technology brand. And that means everybody in this room has to rise to the expectation of what your customer wants. Does your customer really want to navigate your website that way, or do they want it to behave more like something else that they like better? That is what we're up against. Laura Hallberg had a commentary that says, this shoe's design speaks to a cultural context that a tool like Midjourney will never comprehend. It demonstrates what's beautiful about human decision-making. Laura Hallberg, I would say culturally irrelevant because what this actually breeds is contempt and dissatisfaction with a consumer that wants to be more involved. And it's not just products, it's media of all kinds. Mashup culture is a thing that happens online. People are reimagining intellectual property from media brands with these tools to look more like what they want. The commerce and the culture are colliding. So you have here a supposed Harry Potter Balenciaga fashion show. I don't know if you've seen this, but Balenciaga is a brand that sells products, and Harry Potter is every millennial's center of their fantasy universe. And when you bring the two together in a way that never would happen in the real world, it creates a kind of a conversation that now creates an opportunity for these brands to maybe partner in the future. This is multiplayer at work. But it's not just imaginative consumers online. We all have this tool. And in fact, we've used this tool at Future Commerce.
The medium of commerce is a message of desire. You need this, you need that. Publicity and advertising shape the world around us because it shapes the effects of commerce. It manifests the rippling effects of trade, a conversation echoing beneath the surface of transactional realities. If commerce is a medium, the effects are profound. Our mass man is not exempt, but rather immersed, baptized in the very currents of commerce. I'm not Marshall McLuhan, I'm an extension of the senses, a deep fake. But the real Marshall McLuhan was accused of selling out, from media theorist to advertising consultant. Can art and commerce intersect without selling out? We will soon find out.
And this, yeah, if I, of all people, have the tool to create deepfakes, we're in trouble. There's something really interesting happening with the tightening of the media cycle and culture. So art and commerce, let's sort of get on an accelerated path. Let me show you what's happening right now, and then we'll kind of point to the future. The first is, does anyone know who this is, by the way? There you go. All right. So you've probably heard a lot about Travis Kelce in the last year. Something really wild happened overnight. This is the speed at which we have to operate in the commerce ecosystem now. Overnight, between that fateful day where Taylor Swift attended a Kansas City Chiefs game, had dinner with Travis Kelce that night, by the next morning, you had a merchandise website with his outfit that was updated to say 1989, and then you had a photo shoot that happened overnight from New Balance with the same shoe that she was wearing on that date in people's inboxes the next day with a jacket that says 89 on it. Now, you don't have to be a Swiftie to kind of pull all this together. There's one of two things happening. Brands are getting much faster and reactionary to the cultural commentary, where the discourse is the thing you're selling, right? Tell me right now, is this site going to convert well? It doesn't matter. They're going to buy it anyway. Does this convert well? It doesn't matter. What matters is having the right creative that aligns with the discourse. So it's becoming faster. Now, this was created. Some people say this was shot in a studio. Some people say that this was art. No, New Balance will not talk about this, by the way. Mostly because they have a corporate policy that prevents them from using generative AI. So if you just imagine what may have happened is what is more plausible. Did we get a model overnight? Did we source a jacket with 89 on it overnight? Did we get a bleacher, a football stadium bleacher, and put it in a cyclorama and shoot it overnight? Did we merchandise it on the website, and did we get it into people's inboxes with Klaviyo the next morning? Or did we take already existing creative and doctor it with Gen AI? I don't know. I don't know the answer. One of them sounds very plausible, the other one doesn't. Here's an interesting thing. There's another wave coming, and this is where we're going in the future. And I'll accelerate this. If you want to learn more about this, futurecommerce.com, this is what we talk about. If this is interesting at all to you, this is what we do 5 days a week. We have media that hits almost every day between podcast newsletters. We put on sick events. So I'd love for you to come out and join us. Catalogs borrowed the design language of stores. So naturally, when paper was the medium that we published, asynchronous commerce into, where you didn't have to go to a store. Catalogs borrowed from the design language of stores. We had categories, which are basically virtual aisles. The World Wide Web, that also borrowed from catalogs. When we first created websites back in the Magento 1 days with the blue theme, we were creating virtual catalogs. That's what we were doing. But eventually, it becomes less, it refers less to the prior generation, and it takes on a language of its own. The software as a service ecosystem over time has become its own method of delivery, and now we're in a brand new era that is only possible in the internet that we live in today. What you'll notice is that the workforce required to get into customer channels gets smaller over time. So you have hundreds of people required to create catalogs, dozens to create websites, a very small, nimble, agile team to create a software as a service website that can spin it up the same day for $40 a month, or for no cost at all, you can sell one product to millions of people through TikTok. So the acceleration of culture means that the number of people required to get it done is smaller and smaller over time. There's this idea called skeuomorphism, where we used to have to reference the real world to help people understand the digital world. You've probably seen this before. This is what the iPhone used to look like, where you had a newsstand that looked like a newsstand, and a recording app that looked like a real microphone, and a legal pad on your notes app. It doesn't look like that anymore. right? We get it now. We know how to use user interfaces without actually referring to the real world. What happens in this change of the design language is the self-referentiality, as time goes on, becomes more self-referential and less about the prior generation. So it's really telling when you have things like Hailey Bieber outfits coming around within 7 days on Shein from the date that she wore it. You have algorithmic content becomes the trend that spurs the cultural event that creates more demand, that becomes more algorithmic content, that becomes a trend, that creates a new cultural event that makes more demand. The businesses have to accelerate to keep up. This becomes so self-referential that an accident in an AI algorithm that renames a product can cause thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of other products to rename, not because they're also using AI, but because searches are trending on that platform for that phrase. So I apologize, I cannot complete this task. It requires using trademark brand names. That may have happened from one brand, but when searches start trending on Amazon for it so that people can see the joke for themselves, everyone else follows suit. This is multiplayer. And I believe this is multiplayer too. This is fascinating to me. The very first example that you see in the Apple Vision Pro announcement was a shoppable website. And it wasn't a Shopify website. It was a website made on an open source stack of LAMP technology that was created by a good friend of mine. This is the next generation of skeuomorphism. This is the on-ramp to the next platform. This is like the catalog that becomes the digital catalog that becomes the short-form vertical video. One day, we won't need the website in the Apple Vision Pro. But whatever happens, we have to be more attuned to doing this faster. And we have to do it together. Because the algorithms kind of rule everything around us. And they create the moments, we don't. They create the moments for us in a multiplayer future. Just to close the loop, the guy on the left, that's Kevin Gibbs, who pressed the button. The guy on the right, a man named Brett Taylor. You might recognize them today. Kevin Gibbs went on to run commerce at Salesforce. Brett Taylor, board member at Shopify and OpenAI. These guys have created the next generation of the future of commerce. They've been here all along. They're the ones pushing these things forward, but they're building on technologies and multiplayer ecosystems that only you and I uniquely understand. It's up to us. They can't survive without us because we understand how to live in a multiplayer world. That's what we do. Commerce is culture. Thank you so much.